The road was silent, the kind of silence that makes every breath sound too loud. Headlights cut through the darkness, stretching long shadows across an empty highway where no one would hear a scream. Inside a moving vehicle, a young girl sat frozen, her hands trembling, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break through her chest. She was not on a journey, she was being transported, moved across borders the way goods are moved, quietly, efficiently, without care. She had been handed from one stranger to another so many times that faces had started to blur together. Names no longer mattered. Her own name felt distant, almost unreal. And on that cold night, as the vehicle slowed in a remote area where the road disappeared into darkness, something changed. The men transporting her grew careless. A door was left slightly loose. The engine idled. In that brief moment, she understood something terrifying and clear. She had only seconds to decide. If she stayed, she would vanish forever. If she ran, she might die. Fear wrapped around her lungs, but hope, small, fragile, and desperate, pushed her forward. She did not scream. She did not look back. She ran. Human trafficking does not always look like chains and locked rooms. Often it looks like paperwork, vehicles, false promises, and long roads at night. Around the world, trafficking networks operate in silence, moving people across countries as if they are cargo, stripping them of identity, safety, and choice. Victims are told nothing, no destination, no timeline, no explanation, only when to sit, when to stay quiet, and when to move. This story is not about numbers or statistics. It is about one girl whose life was reduced to a transfer, a transaction, a body in the back of a vehicle. Her story represents thousands of others who never get a moment like she did, never see a door unlocked, never find the strength to run. What happened to her on that night was not planned, not guaranteed, and not safe. It was a single moment where fear and courage collided, and a decision was made that would either end her life or give it back to her. This is the story of that night, and the cost of choosing freedom when the world has already decided you do not matter. Before the roads turned dark and the nights became something to fear, she was just a girl trying to survive her circumstances. Her life was not easy, but it was familiar. She knew the sound of her neighborhood, the rhythm of her days, the small hopes that kept her going. She dreamed quietly, the way people do when dreaming feels risky. Education, work, safety, things others take for granted felt distant but possible. When the offer came, it did not arrive as a threat. It arrived as help, a promise of opportunity, of work in another place, of a chance to escape poverty and uncertainty. The words were gentle, the faces were reassuring. She was told many people had gone this way before her. She was told it was safe. She wanted to believe it because believing felt easier than staying trapped in the life she was trying to leave behind. The moment she agreed, she did not know she was stepping into a system designed to erase her. There was no dramatic moment, no warning sign that screamed danger, just a quiet shift from choice to control. The first ride felt strange but manageable. The second felt longer. By the third, questions were no longer answered. Her phone was taken, her documents disappeared. The tone of voices changed. That was when fear began to settle in her chest. She realized she was no longer traveling forward, she was being passed along. Her life, her future, her body had become part of a route, a transaction, something owned by people who did not see her as human anymore. Once inside the trafficking network, time stopped making sense. Days blurred into nights, and nights into endless hours of waiting. She was moved constantly, different vehicles, different hands, different languages she barely understood. No one explained where she was going, no one asked how she felt. Silence was expected, obedience enforced through fear. She learned quickly that asking questions brought consequences. Sometimes it was shouting, sometimes it was threats, sometimes it was the cold look that told her she did not matter enough to be answered. She was never alone, yet completely isolated, surrounded by strangers who treated her like luggage, something to guard but not protect. She slept sitting up, alert, afraid that closing her eyes meant losing control forever. Hunger became normal, exhaustion became constant. The world outside the windows felt unreal, like a movie she was no longer part of. Borders were crossed quietly, often at night. Papers were shown, money exchanged, doors opened and closed. Each transfer stripped away more of her identity. She stopped thinking about tomorrow, because tomorrow always belonged to someone else. Fear became her constant companion, sitting heavy in her chest, reminding her that resistance was dangerous. She heard stories whispered in fragments, people who tried to escape and were never seen again, people who disappeared without a trace. She understood then that this was not just movement, it was erasure. The network thrived on silence, on invisibility, on the belief that no one would come looking. And as the journey continued, she wondered if she would ever be more than a shadow moving through the dark, another lost name no one would ever speak again. The night everything changed felt colder than the others. The air cut through her thin clothes as the vehicle moved along a road that seemed to lead to nowhere. Outside, there were no lights, no houses, no signs of life, only darkness stretching endlessly in every direction. The men transporting her were different this time, relaxed, laughing. Their attention drifted, their caution weakened by routine and overconfidence. To them, this was just another transfer, another delivery to complete. To her, it was survival. The vehicle slowed and eventually stopped. The engine stayed on, humming softly in the silence. A door shifted slightly, not fully secured. It was a small detail, almost nothing, but she noticed. Her heart raced as her mind began to work faster than it had in days. She knew this might be the only chance she would ever get. The risk was unbearable. If she moved and they noticed, the consequences would be immediate and violent. If she stayed, she knew her future was already decided. Fear and courage collided inside her, fighting for control. The cold night pressed in, making the moment feel unreal, like time itself was holding its breath. She listened closely, no footsteps approaching, no voices nearby. Her body trembled, not just from the cold, but from the weight of the choice in front of her. This was not a heroic moment, it was raw, terrifying, and desperate. And yet, in that silence, she understood something clearly. This door, this pause, this careless mistake, this was the only opening freedom might ever offer her. She did not think of herself as brave, she felt terrified. Her hands shook as she leaned toward the door, every muscle tense, every sense alert. Her mind filled with images of what could happen next. Gunshots, shouting, being dragged back, punished for trying. She imagined dying on that road, her body disappearing into the darkness without anyone ever knowing her name. But she also imagined staying, being delivered, being trapped in a life of endless control and abuse. That thought felt heavier than death. Slowly, carefully, she pushed the door just enough to slip through. The cold air hit her face like a shock. For a split second, she hesitated. That hesitation almost cost her everything. Then instinct took over. Her feet hit the ground and she ran. No plan, no direction, just movement, just escape. She expected shouts, she expected footsteps chasing her, she expected pain. But there was only the sound of her own breathing, loud and uneven, and the pounding of her heart. Every step felt like it might be her last. She did not look back, because looking back meant doubt, and doubt meant stopping. In that moment, she was not thinking about freedom or justice. She was thinking about survival, about putting distance between herself and the people who owned her moments ago. The darkness swallowed her as she ran into the unknown, carrying nothing but fear, hope, and the fragile belief that somewhere ahead, life might still be possible. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs felt like they would snap beneath her. The cold night air tore through her chest with every breath, but she did not slow down. Branches scratched her skin, stones cut into her feet. Pain became background noise, drowned out by adrenaline and desperation. When she finally collapsed, it was not a choice, her body simply gave up. She fell into a field, hidden by tall grass and darkness, shaking uncontrollably. Every sound made her flinch. The wind felt like footsteps, her own breathing sounded too loud. She pressed herself into the ground, praying silently that no one had followed her. Time stretched painfully. Minutes felt like hours. She did not know if it was safe. She did not know if she would survive the night. Fear slowly gave way to exhaustion, and exhaustion to something close to numbness. As the sky began to lighten, hope returned in small, fragile pieces. Dawn meant visibility. Dawn meant life. Gathering the last of her strength, she stood and began walking again, each step heavier than the last. She followed instinct, not knowing where she was going, only knowing she had to keep moving. When she finally saw a small building in the distance, a local clinic, it felt unreal. She reached the door and knocked weakly, her words broken, her voice barely there. She tried to explain, but her body could no longer hold her upright. She collapsed at the entrance, finally allowing herself to fall. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer alone. The sterile smell of the clinic, the soft voices around her, the warmth of a blanket, it all felt overwhelming. She was safe, at least for now. Medical staff listened carefully, piecing together her story from fragments and gestures. Authorities were contacted. Questions were asked gently this time. She was no longer treated as cargo, but as a human being who had survived something unimaginable. Her future remained uncertain. Healing would take time, physically, emotionally, psychologically. Trauma does not disappear just because danger ends. But she had done something rare. She had escaped. Many never do. Her story is not unique, and that is what makes it important. For every door left unlocked, there are thousands that never open. For every person who finds help, countless others remain hidden, silenced by fear and control. This story is not meant to shock, it is meant to remind. Human trafficking exists in the quiet spaces, on empty roads, behind closed doors. It survives on our ignorance and silence. The girl who ran that night did not know she would live. She only knew she could not stay. And sometimes that single decision, to choose the unknown over certain suffering, is the most powerful act of resistance a person can make. Her name may be unknown, but her courage speaks louder than any words. Some stories end with answers. This one ends with a reminder. The girl who ran into the darkness survived, but survival does not erase what was taken from her. The fear, the silence, the loss of control, these things do not disappear when the danger ends. They stay, quietly shaping a life that must now be rebuilt piece by piece. Her escape was not the result of a perfect plan or a system working as it should. It happened because of a single careless moment, a door left unlocked, and the courage to act when fear was overwhelming. For every story like hers that reaches the light, there are countless others that remain hidden, moving through empty roads, locked vehicles, and forgotten borders. Human trafficking thrives not because it is invisible, but because it is ignored. It exists in the spaces we do not look, in the silence we choose not to break. This story is not meant to be watched and forgotten. It is meant to stay with you, to remind you that freedom can depend on seconds, that survival can begin with a single choice, and that awareness can save lives. If you hear something, notice something, or sense something that feels wrong, do not turn away. Because somewhere, right now, someone is waiting for a door to open and for someone to care enough to help them walk through it.